So I know your last stint as the air combat commander. I remember you speaking about this specifically, like absorption capability. So fighter pilot production rates, fighter pilot retention.
Yeah.
That was all some hot topics. But one aspect of that was the absorption. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the initial game plan to create more fighter pilots was surging at Seymour Johnson. And they surged for a little bit and kind of broke their backs and said, we can't do any more. And then turned to the Viper because there's guard reserve bases. There's a little bit more absorption capability in the Viper to a certain extent. What was your thinking, or how do you feel like it went, / where we are today? Is it green? Is it healthy? What's your take on it? What kept you up at night?
Yeah, no, I don't think we got there. And, there's several things we can talk about here, but one of them is, one of the things I realized is that, you can talk about a pilot shortage. You can talk about a fighter pilot shortage. What we really had was an experienced fighter pilot shortage. And where that really was worst was in the F-16. So anything that was hard or was a problem or was difficult or was trouble in the fighter community, it was worse in the F-16. And the root cause was you had 3 CONUS active duty fighter squadrons trying to support 8 overseas with a remote tour built in. So there's no life for guys. And the CONUS 3 squadrons were really just an MQT machine and an experiencing machine so they could send guys overseas. The FTUs were trying to keep up with that demand. And so the root cause of that problem was, most of our problems, since half of the pilots in ACC, half of the CAF fighter pilots were F-16 pilots, the real problems were in the F-16 fleet. And because we had problems there, we had problems everywhere. If you went to the A-10, the F-15C, the F-15E, things weren't in nearly as bad a shape in absorption. And, I went to Shaw right after I took command, and they were ready, and they wanted to show me their letter of X's, and they wanted to show me the grind they were under trying to produce students and the limited number of IPs. And, I looked at it and I pulled out a letter of X's from that squadron that I was in the 80s. And they had more IPs in the squadron than any squadron I was ever in prior to 9/11. But we had a little different, model then. Part of it is we flew a whole lot, and so we could experience guys faster. But the squadrons I was in had maybe, 4 or 5 instructor pilots. And the ones they were showing me at Shaw had, 6 or 7, but that wasn't enough to keep up with the load where they were. So we tried to convince people to move Kunsan to Kadena, to do some other things. We weren't successful in doing that, but ultimately I think it's going to require some changes in the F-16 basing ratio. If you're going to fix the F-16, and you have to fix the F-16 to fix the CAF. Part of the reason that we wanted to work hard to try to get op squadrons into Tyndall after the hurricane down there was so we wouldn't build the F-35 Enterprise the same way. We had 3 op squadrons at Hill, and we wanted to go ahead and add 3 down at Tyndall so that we'd have a machine of 6 squadrons in CONUS to produce people to go to the overseas squadrons and eventually the guard squadrons.
Yes, and I imagine the politics of it, once you get 3 squadrons into Tyndall, then at a congressional level, like they're there, and it becomes very difficult for Congress to say shutter it. And I'm, again, watching it at my level, like we're talking about, hey, get rid of what was it? Basically the F-22s that were at Tyndall in the B course that would cost more to upgrade. But when the NDA has that in there, and then Congress says no, you're not retiring them, it's that kind of battle that goes on. So if you're able to get the foothold in there, that's the objective.
Yeah, and I think you have to work with communities. You have to work with your CODELs. I think their CODELs understood that, hey, the F-22 wasn't going to be there forever, even if they keep those airplanes, which are scheduled to move to Langley now and move the FTU up there. But that by, buying into the F-35, they'd be buying into a long-term future for Tyndall. And so, you don't want to start building your plans and your programs. My last 2 jobs in the Air Force, the last one, as you said, was as the Air Combat Command Commander. The one before that was 3 years building the Air Force's program that turns into the budget for 3 years. And you don't want to start building a program or a budget based on political implications, because if you do, you have nothing to argue with or for when you go across the street to the Hill. You just become political like everybody else. But you do need to understand the context and where they're going to go, and try to one of the games you play is what you leave out of the budget is just as important as what you put into it, because you can maybe get other people's money to pay for some of the things you leave out. So you try to figure you get the most money you can to achieve the goals you need, because the Air Force doesn't get enough money to meet all the things that COCOMs want it to do. And so you try to leave a few things out that you think OSD will pay for out of their holdback money, and then a few things that you think Congress will pay for on top of the budget.